Hello everyone, welcome to Art with Alison. Today we'll be discussing tonal values and how it relates to a sphere and other forms. Welcome to Art with Alison. Today we will be discussing tonal drawings and tonal studies. I've got my supplies here today. I have kneaded eraser, I have charcoal, and chalk. These are the basic supplies that we will need today. I'm going to set this down, Kneaded eraser, nice and warm. I'm also going to use my charcoal. First, I just want to talk about gradient. I'm going to do darkest darks to lightest lights, just really fast to show what does tone mean on a paper. So we're going to break this out into different little segments in a minute. So break it out here, roughly here. So here's some basic sort of segments. We have no light, shadow, shadow edge, let's see, middle tone, which is also reflected light, which we will talk about in a minute. Strong light, just really like that, and then strong light, and then highlight. This gradient of tone is basically the overall, everything that's in light is going to have this gradient on it. And so with that in mind, I'm now going to do a drawing from a reference of a sphere. And I am going to completely cover this white paper and charcoal first. Why is she doing that? I want to create a middle tone. The white paper is something that is you struggle when you see the forms, and it's better to have a middle tone. And actually, let's see, I'm going to do just a quick little small sketch. I'm going to do very, very light. And it's not even an outline. I don't want to do an outline right now. I'm just doing a general sort of very, very light. Now I'm going to take and erase out. And this is an opposite. This is a reductive technique. This is taking away value to remove the underlying paper. This is an old master technique that they used with painting and underpainting. And so this would be initially a canvas that then they would put let's see, like burnt umber or raw sienna, cover the entire canvas in that medium and middle tone. And then while it is still wet, they would then erase out and draw out the underlying shapes and the underlying form of the entire piece tonally first. And then once that was dry, then we add color. And so first we need to understand the tone, and we need to understand the basic sort of breakdown of the way that light behaves on an object. And so we're going to discuss basically form shadows and cast shadows. Form shadows meaning the shadows that are created on an object, on a form of an object, and then the shadows that are created from it casting that shadow, occluding the light, because everything is about light. Everything is about, can we see? What can we see? If there was no light, we wouldn't be able to see. So we want to be able, really, life does not have black outlines. It is not, we are not cartoon characters. There is no black outline in life. As you can see, I'm looking at my reference. Now I'm starting with the lightest lights, and I'm taking that out first. And I'm removing the lightest lights initially. Now I'm kind of letting and omitting what would be considered the middle tone on the sphere. I'm also adding in the reflected light. And you can kind of see, but it's not quite as intense. And I'm going to come back with chalk as well, so I just want to sort of see. Initially, these shapes are not, it should be very abstract. It should not make sense. It should not be obvious at first. If someone were to walk into the room while you're drawing this initially, they shouldn't know what it is. Like, it's not supposed to make sense at first. I want you to think about things in a very abstract way, in a very sort of not literal. Now I'm adding in darker darks. The darkest dark that you'll ever find on any object when you're drawing is always going to be when it's the absence of light, is when the object is actually intersecting the ground. That point right there is going to be the darkest dark, and everything else is going to be sort of lighter from that. So shadows really aren't a solid black. But I'm gonna doing a little bit of a shadow here, shadow edge. That's the cast shadow. Now I'm gonna do some form shadow. Now the form shadow itself, it's not just shadow and light. There's this whole shadow edge situation that's happening. And so, as you can see, I'm kind of eliminating a little bit. This band right here is the actual shadow. There's a little bit of darkness that bleeds from that to the middle tone, and that is considered the shadow edge. I'm seeing, you'll also notice, you'll see me when I'm looking, I'll be squinting. So I'll look at my subject and you'll see me go like this. And you'll be like, why is she making a weird face? I'm reducing the lighting information and the detail. So when you see me like make weird faces, I'm literally, and you can do this with your drawing, you can do this with the subject that you're looking at. Then when you squint, it's taking away this lighting information. I need to, there's actually some sunglass material that you can get, little plastic acrylic sheets that you can use to help to sort of stack up and layer, and so that you can see things from a different perspective. It takes away a lot of that lighting information so that you're not, what they would say, seduced by the details. You want to not see the details of the subject. You want to be able to have it just be this overall generalized abstract shape first, that then we can at the very end add the details. I think that's part of the problem. A lot of people add too many details right in the beginning, and then if things need to be changed, they're unwilling to change it because they just committed to so much detail. So the more that you can kind of start off loose and a little bit not committed, the better you're going to sort of turn out. So here I'm just looking, cut out this edge a little bit sharper. The separation of plane. This is separating out two objects, one object from the background. So now I'm separating out that object. I'm going to drop it down a little bit. There's going to be a point though where it's just going to fall off, and I'm going to make it so that the background and the piece kind of become one. So again, there's not this harsh outline that's happening around the shape. It's not, we don't have black outlines around us. I don't have a black outline around my face. There's none of that. It's forms, and so these sort of undulating forms and how light is behaving on that form is really what we need to pay attention to and be sensitive to. And so even though I'm drawing basically also from memory and from my mind, but I am looking at the reference. But I want you to see that even what I'm drawing is not true to that, because I'm making decisions based on the piece itself. We need to also let go of the idea of having it be an exact copy of our reference. I'm trying to think of it as an overall whole that's going to work. And so that's where you can kind of adjust and add, push and pull in the background and the foreground to make decisions on detail. Now I'm adding in this shadow. I'm going to go a little bit dark. You'll see me I smudge it with my hands. I kind of smear it a little bit, make it a little bit soft, and I can always come back and add more detail. But also, just as much, see how there's reflected light. It comes down here. What's happening is basically the photons of light are hitting the ground, they're hitting the surface of the object, of the ground, and bouncing back up. And hitting that light is now bouncing up onto the underside. So that's what's called reflected light, because it's literally reflecting off of the ground and coming back up. That is something that people forget to add when they are drawing tonally. They don't think about the underside, and I think that's important to just remember to incorporate this whole gradient. So I'm going to do a little bit here. Fuzz it out. The shadow is always sharper closest to the object and the light source. As the object and the light source go away, it becomes softer. It's sharper as it gets close to here. So now I will be dropping my charcoal a lot. I will take my chalk and I'm going to create a highlight right here. It may not be as distinct in the reference, but I just want you to be able to see generally what I'm talking about, the different gradient regions on a sphere. Because if you can draw a sphere in value with cast shadows, form shadows, reflected light, you can draw anything. You can draw a person, you can draw buildings, anything that you can imagine. This is the most important thing. This is the hardest thing, is to understand light and its behavior on a rounded form. So if you're able to accomplish that, then you have something going. So here, I'm just starting to push and pull a little bit. I may even, another sort of tip or trick is to always, just as the shadow is meeting that edge, I'm going to give it a little bit of a white pop. Kind of pops that part out just a hair. Let's see, there we go. As you see, I squint at it. I'm still like looking at it from an abstract way. I don't want to be too precise. I'm still sort of seeing it as an overall. I don't want to think about detail too much, but I want to pop out this thing. So I'm going to put in a little bit of a darker shadow just right here to make, because it's so light, I want to create that contrast. Put that contrast there, and I'm going to put this contrast here. This is a basic sphere. Now I can show you, we can connect that. No light. This region right here, this is the complete blackest black. That is right here. No light. Shadow, which is pretty dark. That's this right here. You can see, here's these shadow regions. This region right here. This is our shadow. Shadow edge. Shadow edge is the region just outside of the shadow, just as the shadow is breaking. And that's happening up here, the top part, and down here below. So there's two regions of the shadow's edge. If this is the shadow, then the shadow edge is riding on both sides, which then leads us to this middle tone. Middle tone is probably the hardest thing to perceive. It is the hardest to value or tone to actually visually interpret. You can visually understand shadows really well. You can understand highlights really well. The middle tone is elusive. It took me months, like 6 months of doing a still life setup and having to redraw that setup like 6 or 7 times to slowly understand what it means to create a middle tone and to be able to understand it and render it. As you can see, a lot of this I've omitted of even touching or even like drawing. I'm literally letting that middle tone blob that I had done initially still come through. I don't need to always have to draw in order to be drawing and capturing it. I think that's the one thing people think, that it's like, when driving, that you always have to have the foot on the gas pedal. Sometimes it's coasting. Sometimes it's the absence of something that helps it to become telling that story. That if we always did things too crisp, too exact, too sharp, always putting everything in, we kind of lose the spirit of the piece too. So here's just a basic sort of rundown. So we got the middle tone, and I want to show, where's that middle tone? The middle tone is kind of in this region. It's right in here. And that similar tone is also the reflected light. The reflected light will never be as bright as, say, a strong light or the highlight, but it's definitely going to have a brightness to it. So that underlight is incredibly important. This part is going to tell that story of volumetric rounded shape. That strong light, strong light would be that region, it's kind of tough. Let me see, I'll erase it out. Is this region right around the highlight. Kind of stained the paper a little bit. But that basically is right before the highlight. And then the highlight itself is this white, the white dot. It's the purest white. Theoretically, it would be the highlight, say, in the dot of an eye, reflected on the teeth, things like that, where it's the final little highlight bits, little bits of on the nose, or even, if you're doing on a fruit or something, the highlight on the fruit. Theoretically, it's only white, but actually we're going to talk about color later. But for now, we just want to think about tone. And so from blackest black to whitest white, this gradient that we're creating, this is the foundational tonal structure of anything that you need to draw when it comes to still life. If you can understand this gradient and understand how to represent this in a rounded form on a sphere, You can do this, you can draw a person's face. You can do and draw anything you want at that point, but it really, my goal with this whole process is to teach you how to see. Not so much about drawing, how it's rendered, what you put down on the paper. Even if it's paper, it doesn't even really matter. The output is almost irrelevant. It's your brain and your understanding of what you're seeing is what's going to communicate that much more clearly. Then you can communicate and understand what you're seeing, and then that can be translated into the art. So with that, I think we're going to switch gears and we're going to start to do a drawing using still life of some fruit, and I will show you how to do a setup of that as well. So now I'm going to draw an orange, and today, let's see, the orange, we're going and moving on from the sphere, and now we're going to actually apply it into an actual piece of fruit. We have the plain white canvas or the plain white piece of paper. I'm going to completely just cover it in charcoal. Again, I'm adding my middle tone, oops. But it's a level of letting go of it being perfect. Now, whatever you do on the paper can't be as bad as this. So it's gonna be okay. We've already mucked up the paper. It's already covered in charcoal and smeared. At this point, it can only get better from here. That's my goal. So today I'm going to draw an orange, and I'm going to be kind of leaning back to look at my reference. I'm going to go bigger than life, just so we can talk about the actual what's happening. I'm doing a light sketching of the form, but I'm not doing an outline. I'm not committing. I'm purely almost just making a roadmap. It's just a notes for myself. Right away, I'm also just want to make a decision of where, say, the little stem is going to be. I'm just making some quick little notations. It's purely very, very light. Now I have my kneaded eraser. I have my charcoal. I'm going to kind of stretch out the kneaded eraser, clean it a little bit, gets it. And theoretically, too, this is one thing I want to talk about, that the eraser is not a mistake tool. This is a drawing tool. This is something that you can use to shape into the shape of a pencil. So I'm literally taking this eraser, and it is not something that I use when it's like, oh no, we've messed up, I have to use the eraser. This is me drawing with my eraser, which is sort of counterintuitive, but that's exactly what I'm doing. The old masters would take like a rag or a brush or whatever and just wipe away the burnt umber while it was still wet, the raw sienna on this canvas. They would just erase it away and then come back and add more as needed for the value. But really, you want to think about it. This is a reductive technique. This is reducing and taking away. This is not adding. A lot of people think drawing's all about, oh, I got to put pencil to paper and I gotta sit there and get it right, and shading and all of that silliness. Well, the shading's already done. The value's here. We're just now pushing and pulling from this middle range and deciding from there where to go. So you'll also see me too. There's going to be times I'm going to be putting my arm out. I'm going to be doing this. I'll be doing like practice swings, and it's literally almost like a golf swing. I'm literally pre-drawing before I even touch the canvas or touch the easel. I'm already making decisions, and so I'll look at the reference and my brain's already going, okay, I'm going to cut here, I'm going to cut there, I'm going to do this. And so that way, once I actually do drop into the paper, it's like I've already done it before. I'm not floundering going, oh no, did I do it right? Did I get the right area? It's just, I've already in my brain done it, so it becomes easier, and I'm not struggling to try to keep up with. And as well, you can see I'm not being precious with it. I'm not being, oh, I erased too much or I put too much here. We don't want to fuss with it, especially at this phase. If someone were to walk into the room right now and look at just your drawing, it shouldn't make sense. They should not go, oh, that's an orange. No, then we failed. It's like we shouldn't have high detail at this point. This is not the point for detail. Another thing too, as I go through this process and I'm erasing out, I ask myself questions a lot of the time. Really, it's where's the light? Where's the shadows? What else do I need while in this light or shadow pass? Another thing too is theoretically we could do, and it's important to keep track of, is to on any piece that you're doing, let's do darkest dark, so we'll work backwards. Go upside down. Darkest darks to lightest lights. Create a key for yourself. Have that on your piece. You can even just have it on a separate piece of paper, but it's helpful to have it close by. So that way, when the darkest darks are really dark. And you can even like make them into your little segments. There you go. And having this just key will help as we then try to approach drawing this. So we can say, okay, I'm in the middle tone range. What does that mean? We're in middle tone. I'm in the shadow edge range, or I'm in the shadow range. And so these are just ways of keeping us in alignment so that we're not straying. This is too dark. So that we're not worrying too much. It's about, you should be having fun. We should also be observing, paying attention to what we're seeing and capturing that. Not worrying about whether or not it's right or wrong or accurate. I know that we're viewing it through a TV screen and there's, it's a single cameras and all that, just having that view. But I want you to be able to use your own brain and your own eyes and your own creativity. I want you to be able to create your own setup. I want you to be able to make your own setup. I want you to have your own, create your own, just have a cardboard box with a clip-on light from anywhere, just a simple clip-on light. Put something in a box with some paper. Draw what you see. Use your own brain and your own eyes to make decisions. People rely too heavily upon cameras and the algorithms and coding of a camera on a microchip, as opposed to their own brains and just seeing with their own eyes and making choices on that. And I think that's where a lot of the problems people get stuck on, thinking that photorealism has to be literally copying from a photo. Realism is about observation, and it's about what do you see in this moment and what are you capturing in this moment. That's more important. That's what the old masters were learning, was observing and studying their natural world, and then capturing that, taking field notes and going back into the studio to create masterpieces. So I'm looking at my reference. We're right back to that sphere again, where literally it's just a sphere at this point. We've done the exact same drawing. We're going to switch it up a little bit, but again, I'm not trying to get detail. I want it to be abstract. I want it to be indistinct at this point. I don't want it to be obvious that I'm drawing an orange. We need to kind of wait, because an orange really at the end of the day is more of a sphere. So I'm just going to add some of that detail. Now I'm going to start to soften edges, and you can see, my hands, I'm getting very dirty, mucked up with charcoal and whatnot. There's a permission to sort of get messy. You don't always have to have this perfect, pristine presence or experience when it comes to drawing. I think people think that you have to have it be perfect and precious and precise always. No, that's ridiculous. I feel like it's all about progress, and it's all about whether or not you're having a good time. This is not, we're not curing cancer, we're not saving lives. It doesn't have to be so serious, but I think people, when they start drawing and they're putting something down on the paper, it's as though they're performing brain surgery, and any wrong move and the patient will die, and it's that serious. And I think we need to let go of our fear of making a wrong move, because that's hindering our ability to really be present and experience what we're seeing in front of us. And so I'm just doing the quick, again, we got sphere again, but now I'm going to come back and now I'm going to add in a little stem. I see that there's sort of wrinkles of the skin. If you notice too, when I'm drawing and I'm using my pencil, I'm not just using the tip of a pencil. When I'm drawing, I'm not signing a document. We don't draw like this. You also notice my easel's vertical. It's not on a flat piece of paper. You want to have it drawn and created in the way that it's going to be viewed. And so when I'm drawing, I don't use the tip of the pencil. I'm not drawing with my hands like this. You'll notice I'm holding the chalk and charcoal like this. And it gives you that ability to control the edge. Even if you're using a pencil or a pen, holding it like this as opposed to this. When you push it like this, you're pushing down on the tip, and you're gonna lose all sort of gradient details, just committing to hard line, and that's it. There's no softness. This way, when I'm drawing off the side, and with these, I'm literally drawing the edge. I'm literally taking the edge of the charcoal and dragging it there's this level of like it being imprecise and yet it's close enough. I think that if you can get that sort of good for now vibe, like that's enough. That we don't have to be so perfect and precious with everything. But then it kind of allows for a little bit more life. So now I'm going to start to decide my edges, decide where is the separation of plane, where do I want to break up. The object that we're looking at, it's cast shadow, and then the background, the atmosphere behind it. How do I describe that? Make choices on, even if the light is lighter or if the background is lighter or darker, we can make choices and adjust. No one's going to see your reference unless you show them. So the final piece matters more whether or not that works than whether or not you're getting it exactly to the reference. Because people aren't going to care. As long as it kind of looks like an orange, that's good enough. You don't have to have it always be this perfect, exact, precise, so I need to get every little wrinkle in the skin. That loses life. You don't really, like John Singer Sargent's art, his paintings, his portraits, you can tell he's very loose. He's very detailed when it comes to the eyes. He's very detailed with how we render and portrait. All of the face in that sense is very tightly rendered. Everything outside of that sort of falls away and it becomes very just quick brush strokes. He's very like whatever man about it. He wants you to stay focused on what's important, which is their eyes, their face, their personality. That's way more important. Everything else, like the detail of the like lace on their dress or whatever, like that's not as important. So you can just kind of be like, you know what I'm saying? Because really at the end of the day, drawing is communicating. It's really, and personally, I think it's sort of like human language. It's the first language we all as humans use and communicate with. It's the one thing that humans, we can speak different languages and we can draw something and people will know immediately what you're talking about. It's how you give ourselves directions to get to the gas station. I mean, there's just layers of why, we're artists when we're children. As humans, drawing is our way of communicating. And if we're able to have the tools to speak that language, then we have a lot more to say, and then we can actually really start sharing what we're thinking and feeling. And so here I'm just kind of working my way through. You can see, it breaks in my hand. Like, it is not perfect or precise in any way, shape, or form. Now I'm going to start giving it a little bit of randomness, breaking it up a little bit. I'm also want to think about maybe turning it. Let's give a sense of 3D volume. It's almost like a basketball. Now I'm going to erase. I'm going to start taking out and erasing a little bit. Now, let's see. And just take this. The texture of the orange is something that you can use by literally swirling. You don't have to have it be perfect. I'll go over some of the drawing techniques as well in a second. And kind of rough skin. And that's literally drawing and I'm literally just swirling and creating this sort of texture. And I will come back, but there's this idea of it, you don't always have to do one thing and then that's the permanent thing. I can come back and adjust as needed. We don't have to have it be perfect the moment I'm done drawing. Like, there we go. It can be a little bit looser. The texture of our fingers, this is literally, I'm like finger painting right now. This is not, I'm not being super precious and precise. So I'm going to do my little shadow's edge. I got my shadow. There's even some reflected light and some, sorry, this is kind of leaning in. There's a little bit of reflected light in the shadow itself. It's kind of crazy. There's this light down here. There's also some down here. It's not a solid shadow. So there's that. And I'm going to pull it up a little bit. Let's pull it up. See, and that's the thing too, is always stepping back, looking at it from a distance. Add this. Now I'm going to do the stem itself. See, now we can start to add in a little bit of details. Now I'm coming in and adding in. And even then, I'm like using my hand, I'm just kind of really loose So we're taking the same concept of the sphere and now we're applying it into something that we could find in our kitchen. Just having a basic orange and how we can then do a quick study of that. And so this is an example of that. We're now going to move on to the bowl of fruit. The bowl of fruit will be the next phase. We're going to take this from the sphere. We've done the orange, and now the bowl of fruit will be the next one. It's sort of ubiquitous within the art world for a reason, because it is both the simplest and most difficult thing to capture. Is if you can draw a bowl of fruit and understand that and compose a scene with it, then everything else is going to be a lot easier. So with that, this is orange.